G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Trewin. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Mark LaScola from On The Mark, based in both London and Phoenix in the USA, London, UK. And thanks for your time today, Mark.
Troy, thanks for having me.
Let's start with how we know each other. Dina from Clearly Strategies, your PR firm, reached out a few months ago, thought you'd be a great guest for us.
Yeah, and I love talking about growing a business and to entrepreneurs. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, this one could top our record of over 2 hours long, I think. We both had a bit of a chat before I hit record, and I think I'm really going to enjoy this.
Yeah, I'm going to get straight to the point, Troy. Like you, I won't beat around the bush. And, it's 35 years I've been out on my own. So raised a family, have lots of experience, lots of scars, lots of lessons. As Stephen Stills talked about, I never failed to fail. It was the easiest thing to do right along the way. So
we'll tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Yeah, we're a professional services firm providing consulting services in organization design, which is the solution. Basically, we modernize operating models for companies when they make strategic changes or they've made a lot of changes around the edges and they can't get the efficiency or effectiveness or the positioning that they like. So when we talk about an operating model, it's really an extent everything that a company does and puts together from its people, its IP, its processes, its technologies to basically win in the marketplace. And we come in and redesign that from the ground up. One of the major differences about our company is that we do this work entirely collaborative. Meaning that we don't come in and tell a company what to do. We educate, we inform, we give them the trade-offs, we lead them through that. But essentially, we never step over that line, unlike the big bombs. I think the other piece of that differentiates us is in the marketplaces. We've done over 500 of redesigns around the globe for just about every type of industry, mostly large regional, national, and multinational companies.
And your book came out last month in February. Maybe tell our audience, we'll link through to it in the show notes, the title of the book and what it's about.
Yeah, well, it's going to come out in the early summer, late spring in 2025.
Yep.
And it's about modernizing operating models, and that'll be through Amplify Publishing. And it's really targeting executives, and basically saying, if you're going to modernize your operating model, here's what it is, and here's what to do, and here's why, and here's what not to do, and here's why, and real pragmatic, lots of case studies, lots of examples, and it's really just a culmination of the 35 years of my career doing this work.
Great. And how did you start out?
I was actually thinking about that when I read the question. It's actually a bit funny. My last real job was with a small consultancy who in the late 80s, early 90s wanted to get into building teams. And they were doing work in terms of literacy, remedial math and reading skills in the semiconductor industry. And I was building this new part of the business for the company. And I got into one of the co-owners just went off the deep end on me in one of our leadership team meetings and just like hammered me and not physically, but verbally yelling at me, screaming at me. And it was at that point I thought, I'm just going to go do what I'm doing here for them, and I'm going to go do it out on my own. And that was a spring of 89, 90. And I just at the time, I'm divorced now, but my ex-wife, who I'm still wonderful friends with, and I'm grateful for that. She was in the news business as a news producer, writer, and on-air talent. And I went home and I said, you know what? I think I'm going to go out on my own. And we sat down and I took $5,000 of my own money, which at the time was a lot of money, and I went over to CompUSA and bought a color monitor and a dot matrix printer and a computer, and I set up shop in my spare bedroom. And then it wasn't long after that we had we found out we were expecting our second child, and it's like, well, how am I going to do that? And of course, then life just kicks in, right? But that's how I started. Takes a little bit of denial, but a lot of passion and belief, and some other ingredients to kind of make it. But that's how I started.
Certainly does. Some grit. Sounds like the catalyst for you was an arsehole. I had my one and only ever job out of uni was at PricewaterhouseCoopers, the largest now accounting firm in the world. And I actually, halfway through my 3 years there, Pricewaterhouse merged with Coopers and Lybrand, which was a great experience and something great to watch. And I had several different managers over those 3 years, and one in particular was not very good at communicating, and was also a little bit aggressive and just not a nice person. So sounds like a good catalyst to make you to think to jump.
Well, yeah, one of the things that I've learned about people, and it's one of the lessons we're going to talk about here when you get to, lessons learned kind of thing is, everyone has their breaking points, and it's not easy being an owner, how you cope with the stress and whatever set him off that day, I can't even recall. It doesn't really matter. He's still a decent guy. But clearly that day he did it at the right time, and I just thought, I don't need this. And nothing like working for yourself. If you're going to work hard, you might as well do it for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And how old were you back in 1999 when you started business?
1990, I was, I was just about 34.
Yep. Great.
Yeah, I'm 68 now.
Yep. And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business?
Yeah, I think so. I think the key numbers go along over 500 redesigns completed around the globe, on 5 continents, on over 45 different countries, touched thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. The numbers, our business, it's funny. Our best year over our first 20 years, we had a $4 or $5 million year, and we're talking dollars. But we typically used to run right around 2 to 3 million pretty consistently, and then we'd have a good year, or then we'd have, or like for example, 9/11 when 9/11 hit, or when Lehman Brothers crashed in 2008. Again, part of the lessons, we'll talk about that. But our business dipped quite a bit, and we had to kind of struggle through that. It's in fact one of the things I'm most proud of is being in business consistently for 35 years and employing people. When I started, Troy, it's funny. I started, it was just me in my spare bedroom, and I remember one night going to bed and saying to my ex-wife, "Yeah, I've got $20,000 worth of checks that have been sitting in my drawer for a month, and I don't have time to go to the bank." Now, this is 1990, right? You couldn't take a picture with your phone and deposit things. So you remember things were a little bit difficult. But I remember saying, she's going, "Why don't you hire someone? Why don't you hire someone to do those things for you?" And it's like, and the light bulb went off. And so I started on my own. When we ended up, we were between 30 and 40 people, depending on how you want to count it. And of course, your audience will know before the end of this podcast that we were acquired by Turner & Townsend. They're a global project management firm owned by CBRE, so old Coldwell banker Richard Ellis conglomerate, and that occurred in May of this year.
Right. So, May 2024, yeah.
Yep, May 2024. So when we were acquired, we were between 30 and 40 people. Our income was about 5 to 7 million, depending on how you want to count it. So and that income, by the way, increased exponentially over the last 3 years, quite dramatically.
That's
which
great.
means we were hiring. We were hiring quite a bit, and what have you, and growing our operations and everything else. So it's been quite the last few years.
That's amazing growth and a journey, especially over 35 years. That's phenomenal, Mark. Well done.
Thank you, Troy. Well, you know full well it's a team effort, and a lot of the kudos go to and accolades go to the people around me. But I also I have two beautiful, strong adult daughters who are out there. One's an entrepreneur, another one's in consulting, and they tolerated it. And one of the beauties of having the business is they got to travel the world with me and see things that most families don't get to see. And it was one of the things that I worked very hard to incorporate along the way, because there were also times when I missed being at home for maybe Thanksgiving or other holidays. And we'll talk more about that as we get into more detail.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
Troy, I saw that question, and I have to tell you, this last year, 2024, has been one of the toughest years for me that I've had in a long time. My divorce that happened in 19 was really hard. It's just hard no matter who initiates it, and that was difficult. But 2024 was very difficult for me. Some personal reasons, but also the final negotiation for the purchase of the business took its toll. I had some acting out by some of my co-leaders who are around me. Again, I'll get to those kind of lessons. And the reason I raise this, to answer your question directly, is I'm just starting, Troy. I'm just starting to celebrate what I really actually been acquired. When the acquisition actually happened, my two daughters, Dania and Elena, called me, and we all shared a bottle of champagne virtually. And I literally cried for hours, Troy. And the crying was about I busted my hump over 35 years to do what I needed to do. And there's a lot of sacrifice you make. It's not like I'm an internet influencer and just taking pictures of things. And it's really taken me 6 months to really process what it all means, and what I was able to achieve. And really, quite honestly, Troy, both my parents are working class, blue collar. I went to, my parents said, go to college. I went to college. I went to graduate school. I took loans out. I played, I got soccer scholarships to play in university. I feel like I've been blessed, but I know the price that I paid before I started the business, and before I graduated from my master's. I worked the night shift for 12 years in a grocery store, stocking shelves. So I'd work all night from 10 to 6. And then I'd do my internships in the daytime, and then my graduate courses at night. And I'd sleep here and there. And that whole journey has just been coming to grips with that. So my celebration, I know that's a verbose, long-winded answer to your question, but I'm really just now realizing what I was able to achieve. But I have so much more fire in my belly. I'm looking at like what's next for me.
Yeah. Have you listened to any of John Morrow's 3 books or his weekly podcast?
I have, actually.
Yeah, we've had John on a couple of times. Great guest. But he says on his podcast, he gets obviously a lot of guests on that they've all exited, or sometimes they're the acquirers, but most of them are people that have exited. And there's a consistent theme there, which people who have sold say that 6 months after is really, really tough, and you've got to give yourself a break and give yourself time. Don't do much, and just set yourself up to expect that time. So it sounds like that's what you went through.
Well, it's funny. It's actually what I'm investing a lot in myself. I just got back from, we talked before the show started. I just returned from 2 weeks in Bali with my partner, and having a lovely time. And I can't tell you, Troy, the last time I'm entirely disconnected from work. And in February this year, I'm going to do what I did in graduate school, which is I took a winter off and skied up in Lake Tahoe. And I'm going to do that again. I'm going to work virtually in the morning and then ski in the afternoon. And just so I'm just getting into place now. Let me say this. I'm really clear, and I'm really ready to leave the business. I'm signed up for another 2.5 years. which is totally fine because I'm really growing the team and mentoring the next generation or two in my craft. But it's at the same time, I know my place. I'm no longer the CEO. I'm just an influencer, and I'm completely happy with that. I'm completely happy with that. So it's really focusing now on my book and what else is going on in my future, and taking the time to reinvent myself and celebrate what I've been able to achieve.
What does success look like to you?
Well, as I said, I still have a lot of fire in my belly. So I think success in the immediate future is publishing my book and talking a lot about that. And it's going to be kind of hard hitting, and I suspect there'll be some controversy around that in terms of things that I have to say. I'm hoping that I get a lot of opportunities for subject matter expert placement, either teaching, talking at. I'm working on a TED talk, so I'm doing things like that just to kind of put myself out there. Mark LaScola as a brand, as opposed to on the mark. I also believe deeply in giving back. But the future for me is also about taking care of myself and enjoying what I've been able to achieve. And so playing, I like to surf. I like to snow ski. I like good wine. I like having a nice dinner with friends. Nothing like comedy and laughter and making the best of things. So that's all part of my future.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
This has rung true for me for 35 years, is take care of the customers that you have and make sure they're successful, and the rest takes care of itself. I have been saying that, Troy, from day one. Of course, we have social media, and we have a social media presence. We have a marketing team. I have a PR firm, doing the things that we need to do for the business. But the number one thing, by and far, is do what you say you're going to do, make your customers successful, and the rest takes care of itself. And that's how I've grown the business, is through word of mouth and helping customers be successful. And you think of all the people that I've touched, the hundreds of thousands that On the Mark has touched. Those people grow into leaders and become leaders of their own businesses. And remember, oh gosh, we did this work with Mark LaScola or at On the Mark, and they reach back to us. And I can't tell you how many people reach back to me on a monthly basis. I'll hear people say, I don't know if you remember me, but I was part of this design team in this project. And in many ways, it's like I can go back to those projects in a nanosecond, remember the meeting rooms we were in, or something very specific about those projects. So it's really about taking care, delivering on what you say you're going to deliver, and making your customers successful.
Totally agree with that. And the operative word in professional services is professional, and that strapline underneath it, do what you say you're going to do. For me, it's so simple, yet rarely practiced. It's not that common, especially in accountants and lawyers. It shits me to tears. Like, I've had 15 businesses in 3 countries with 30 business partners. I've worked with a lot of lawyers and accountants, and just the simple follow up. Like, sometimes you don't get a reply. Other times you get a month later. It's just unbelievable. You got to weed out.
There's a whole podcast on that. One of the
Yeah.
things that's in professional services, any professional services, including the legal and other fields, is the charging by time and activity. In our firm, for example, we charge by deliverables, and we give them one price, and we say, look, if we've scoped it badly and the scope hasn't changed, that's on us. I really, really enjoy giving our customers some commercial certainty about, this is what you're going to get. We're not going to nickel and dime you. We're not going to charge you for time or activity you might get in one moment. And we keep the teams consistent, and we keep seniors mixed with a mix of talents, so you don't just get all green MBAs running around like ants in a picnic basket, kind of a swarm in your business. So it's been really fun. And in those industries that you just mentioned, it just drives me nuts when it's just about time and activity.
And how did you fund the business? Is it bootstrapped all the way? A lot of professional services.
It has. It's been bootstraps all the way. I took a line of credit out. My ex-wife and I basically used our house as collateral, And over the years, we went from, I think, a $50,000 line of credit. I initially invested about 10, 15,000 back in 1990 of my own money, including the 5,000 for the dot matrix printer and the color screen and color monitor, but also some other things just to get going. In my first year of business, I claimed $8,000 as income on my income taxes. I have saved that tax return, even though I don't have to, just to keep me humble and to remind me. It's anyway, it's part of the journey.
Yeah, it is. And so no other investors along the way, or you didn't do an employee share ownership plan, ESOPs?
No, we didn't do employee ownership or ESOP. I always wanted to, but one of the things we did do is we've had profit sharing and defined benefit plans for our employees all along the way. And I did a lot of generous. One of the things about my nature is generosity, and we have a guideline. So, for example, our holiday policies, everybody gets a month. Like there's no the 2 weeks nonsense in the U.S. is just
That's ridiculous. I could not believe that when I first heard that US generally you only get 2 weeks holiday. No wonder, I read something the other day that Australians live 5 years longer than Americans.
yeah. There's a reason for that, my friend. And I've always thought, well, my ex-wife, her family's from Germany. I travel a lot to Europe, and it had a big influence in the rest of the world on my life. My first trip to Europe was in 1982 to see the World Cup in Spain, and I ended up spending 12 weeks traveling around Europe. But being down under and being on different continents, you get an appreciation for work-life balance. And so even though I wasn't able to do like employee ownership, we had really significant bonuses. I took care of people. We didn't track vacation time, so people took a month and a half, and it made sense. Do what you need to do for yourself. Take care of yourself. So it's been very important for me in that way to take care of the people that have taken care of me.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
I would, because I have a deep belief. So my first redesign experience, Troy, was in 1987. And before I was even in the industry, and what we didn't talk about is my master's degree is in marriage and family therapy with an emphasis in human systems and human systems processes. And people go, "What's the link between your master's degree and the business?" So it's massive. In our work, because we're highly collaborative, we basically focus on simultaneous technical change of the operating model and behavior change simultaneously. And there's an art and a science to doing that work through the neuroscience and social sciences and everything we know. It really leaves change management in the background, basically outdated and ineffective when you compare the way we do change work as opposed to the way most companies go about it. But with that said, just remind me of the question so I can get back on track, Troy. Just state summary.
If you had all the funding in the world, would you go into your industry?
Yeah. Fundamental to my beliefs is this whole thing around people support what they help to create. And you can apply that in community. You can apply that in your local community. You can apply that in socioeconomics, politics. It's the only way we get things done is bringing people together to solve problems. And because that's so core to who I am, I probably would go back and do the same thing again. I love this work, and as I talk more about the work itself, I get quite passionate about it. Because when it works, there's nothing like it. It's unbelievable in terms of seeing the impact and seeing results.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Do I have to have one, Troy, or can you give us several?
Well, I think, Mark, over 35 years, you can take more than one.
Thanks, Troy. Yeah, it's a gray hair comes from someplace. I think some of the stressful points, and then I'll talk with you about what we did, is not putting all your eggs in one basket. So 9/11, we had we we probably had 10 projects going simultaneously when 9/11 happened. And three of those, or three or four, were with American Express. And if you know New York, you know that the American Express business building headquarters is right next to the World Trade Center, was right next to it. So without getting into that harrowing day and all the carnage from that, when in a moment's time you lose business and income, it teaches you about what you better do to make sure that doesn't happen again. And then the hardest thing that comes with moments like that is if you don't have coffers. If you don't have, one of the things I always tried to do was have 3 to 6 months worth of operating cash behind me in case something like, in case there's a downturn or things like that nature. And so learning how to navigate through moments like that, it's just, and you're impacting people. You look around and, you've got people dependent on you. So not only your own family and my own kids, and my own wife at the time, and my own house payments, but I've got employees. So by 9/11, I think we had probably at least 10 people working with us, and people have car payments and house payments and children and rent to pay, and it's a big deal. And so learning how to navigate through that in a way that is proactive, but also balances the risk, because you can't put everything up for risk, right? And so balancing all those things is a very important lesson, and it's going to happen to every business. There's no such thing as like just this clean increasing line of income. Shit happens, and excuse me for I'm just taking your lead on that, Troy.
Yep.
Shit happens, and you better be prepared for it. In fact, it's one of the things about being able to be successful is you've got to learn how to cope when shit happens, and then make your best decisions, figure things out, and make your best decisions. So that's one of the low points. Again, it happened in 2008 with the Lehman Brothers crash. This is also one of the lessons is, as you look at your business at any point in time as a leader, you have to think about diversity of your service offering, diversity of your customers, and diversity of your geographic locations and industries. You don't want all your eggs in one basket ever. And one of the things that 9/11 taught us was the importance, and we were already doing some international work, but it really brought home the fact that you've got to make sure that you don't have any more than our guideline was no more than a third of income with any one company, any one country, so any one customer. Now, did we violate that? All the time, but it sent a signal to us. What are we going to do to make sure we've got some defense against shit happening in the world?
Any other big stressful moments in those 30?
Yeah, there are. People around you in a professional services firm. Let me give you one example. In our firm, we have a well-defined methodology that I authored, and it's our intellectual property, and I've authored over 30 years. Now that know-how is entirely documented. And when you're a small company, what you don't think about is locking things down and protecting yourselves. But it was always, how do you find the balance between giving your employees, trusting the people around you, but at the same time recognizing the risk? We hired a woman and who basically came in and in 3 months quit. But before she quit, she literally raided our SharePoint. Now we had to take legal action and things like that, but because we compete on what we call service differentiation, meaning our defined solution, it's there for the picking, and so it's also the reason why we don't work with a lot with contractors, because we don't want to train consultants and then they go out and become our competitors, right? So they take our know-how and they apply it. and yet you trust people. But I think it's one of the things is you've got to learn how to find the balance between trusting people, but also minimizing the risk in your business. And there's always that balance. And how do you pull that off as a leader and being fair to your people and not sending a message that everyone's distrustful? It's a very fine line to walk. It's a very fine line to walk. Another lesson has to do with hiring and firing. It's learning how to trust your judgment. It's taken me a long time to be able to get my intuition. It takes me about 5 minutes to get a sense of a person. One of the things we do in initial interviews is we don't interview the person. We let them ask all the questions they want. We give them a half hour to say, what do you want to know? And I'll get on the phone as a CEO with them and say, ask whatever you want. And, one of the things that's really apparent is as people speak, so they think, right? So the questions they ask tell you a lot about what's top of mind for them. And if they haven't thought of many questions, well, they haven't done much preparation. We tell them the CEO is going to get in on the phone with them. It's their first kind of touch base with us. And some people ask really thoughtful, well thought out questions that go, wow, that's a really good question. And you get a sense of their strategic thinking or their tactical thinking or their self-centeredness or their focus towards collective good. And so learning about reading people, making quick judgments on them, also giving them a chance and finding that balance is all part of the lessons learned. And of course, there's so many mistakes I've made along the way. If we'd have to have a podcast for 3 days for me to go over all those, but those are some of them, and I have more, and I might pepper them in throughout as I talk about what's been successful.
Yeah, we'll get to the hiring question in a minute. What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
It's really my finance skills, Troy. Really understanding profit loss, balance sheets, EBITDA, all that stuff that becomes important to leaders or CFOs in particular. Not always important, but really I've had to shore that up. Of course, in a social science master's degree, particularly in psychology or clinical psych, I'm not getting a lot of finance background. So I've worked very hard, and actually I've hired coaches around finance to basically work with me and make sure I'm getting it right. And even to this day, I've got people on my team who are way smarter than me on that. But it's really understanding enough. I think the other thing. Well, let's stop there for now. I think that's probably by far number one.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a tough question because it gets a little bit probably controversial and part of what made 2024 a challenging year for me. But I'm gonna go for it just for the benefit of your listeners. One of the things that's really important is to be able to hire people and surround yourself with people you trust. You're going to hear this from me, and I worked really hard at empowering those co-leaders around me, particularly as it became more and more apparent that the business was going to be acquired. And of course, that it was time for me to step down as a CEO. And I had actually hired my CEO replacement 2 years back, and was grooming him and another leader to really be the future leaders of the business. And that also meant that they were making lots of decisions around hiring. It's a fine balance between saying, no, this person's not going to fit with our organization, as opposed to trusting those new leaders coming on board and saying, if you think they're the right people, I'll go with it. And saying to them, but if it was up to me, I wouldn't hire them. And that's been part of the challenge for this year, is both those leaders and the future CEO left the company for reasons of purely money. and and then I'm left with talent that I'm going, you know what? I should have been more forceful. But part of my, hindsight's 2020, Troy. One of the things that I think about is if I was more forceful, I would have never been building the next generation of leaders for the business.
Yeah.
And so you can see the conundrum for me. It was very conscious and intentional, but at the same time, you just, again, one of the things you have to be is resilient when you're on your own business. You've got to be able to process things that are very painful, make sense of them, get up the next morning and put one foot in front of the other and keep going.
Yep.
You know,
That sounds like a very challenging year, 2024.
yeah, very challenging, and for additional personal reasons. But the end of 24 now, it's amazing sometimes what you have to go through, and to realize in hindsight, it was the best thing that could have happened.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
I love the work, Troy, that we do, and the work that I think that we've done for companies and continue to do is very meaningful. When you have hundreds of people in a room redesigning their own businesses and being inspired and engaged, and that because of your solution and because of the space and the container that you've created is allowing that to happen, and you have leaders who are blossoming, and who think, my gosh, why have we waited so long to do this? Why? It's just phenomenal, and the joy that I see over and over again over the 35 years in this work has just been, it's just, I can't say enough about it, and it's what gets me up in the morning, because I believe so deeply in the work that we do, and I believe so deeply in the adage, people support what they help to create, and it's what creates stickiness. Most change in organizations is nonsense. We're going to get to this. We're going to PowerPoint slide people to death. We're going to tell them what we're going to do. Everybody waits as long as they can so they don't have to change, and nothing changes. And you move a lot of people around, and you move some managers around, and and that's not change. That's just nonsense. And unfortunately, it happens all too much. All too often. And the thing I love about our work is, not only does behavior change, but the change we make is really sticky and sustainable, because we're not making those decisions because it's in the blood, sweat, and tears of the people who actually should be making decisions, which is, the employees and leaders and the managers. It's just incredible to watch those things happen.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Well, I'm going to start with just the opposite. It's still amazing to me how many of the beliefs that I started the business in that spare bedroom in my first house, I still get activated, are still part of the business, a key part of the business. I think the mindset shift has to do with maturing as a leader of the business. You can care for your people, but you have to mature, and you have to grow, and you have to take the heat. And when all hell breaks loose, you got to take the heat. And when things are going well, it's everybody else's contribution. And it's true in many ways. But the mindset shift has to do with growing as a leader and finding your way and being comfortable in that skin and what it really means to lead people. And it's not about happiness. Of course, you want your team members to be happy. You want them to be satisfied, but it's also important that you can't make people happy 100% of the time, and don't even try, kind of thing.
No, that's right. I don't know if you heard the Texan saying the definition of conflict is two people in the same county.
I have heard that. Actually, I heard it about 3 weeks ago. It was actually pretty hilarious when I heard it.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
It's about coping and resilience, diligence. One of the things I've reflected quite a bit on this question when you gave me some pre-reading before our podcast. It's about you need to make sure you've got some supports around you. like friends, family, people you trust, people who love you, because it's part of the resilience and part of the ability to get up in the morning. Uh, you need to be able to trust your decision making and learn how to make decisions. And you take one of the things, for example, for me is when there's a big decision in front of me, I'll consult, I'll listen to what everything people have to say, but I know that the bottom line is ultimately I'm going to make that decision and I have to make it. And I think learning how to do that is also an important part of the equation, but it's also the ability to take a problem to bed and sleep on it. My ex-father-in-law, who's now passed, Klaus, used to say everything looks better in the morning.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of wisdom to that. At the end of the day, some days I could be so emotionally spent that I could barely cope. And then realizing that it's never a good time to make a decision when you're emotionally drained. And so having a sleep or 2 nights sleep or 3 nights sleep and really getting some perspective on things is, I think, a big part of how you learn how to cope with both challenges and things that come out of nowhere, good and bad. It doesn't really matter. It's also important to not get so high on when things go well, and keeping your eye on, planning. That saying is hope for the best and plan for the worst. Is such an important part of, I think, running the business, is celebrate your wins, but also know they're not always going to be there, and you got to be prepared for those rainy days and other things. And I think that's also one of my greatest gifts that I've applied since day one, knowing that I was the breadwinner. My family was entirely dependent on me, and so and my employees are entirely dependent on me. How do you learn how to balance that? It's all part of the equation, and live with that. You saw the movie Shawshank Redemption, right?
Yeah, great movie.
Boy, what a fantastic movie. There's a scene in there where they just found out that their friend was released and he hung himself at the hotel. I forgot the specifics, but they're sitting against the wall, and Morgan Freeman says, when I got into the prison, I hated these walls. He goes, but now I've learned to love them. And one of the things that business owners and entrepreneurs have to come to grips with is learning how to deal and live with ambiguity. There would be days, and I'd go home and think, I don't know where our income's coming from, because in 30 days we run out of cash, right? And one of the things that's really important is you look around the room and you say, it's up to us. There's nobody else. Nobody's going to rescue us. It's up to us. And learning how to live with that ambiguity and that sometimes stress is a really important part of coping. Really important. So that diligence, that perseverance, learning to cope is all part of that equation, and I think goes into and working hard. It goes into being successful at however we define success.
Want specific advice to help you get your business through its #1 growth challenge? Book a free 20-minute growth chat with me, Troy, the founder of Grow a Small Business. I'll recommend some resources which will help you grow your business with ease so you can live the lifestyle you've signed up for. Go to growasmallbusiness.com and click on Growth Chat. Yeah, and so you've peaked recently at around 40 team members, but obviously being in business for 35 years, you would have hired a lot more people than that. I'm guessing well over 100. Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Oh, yes. Gosh, I can. Well, first of all, it's one of the things I'm most proud of after growing the business, from my spare bedroom. And it's really rare, by the way, it's really rare to have a professional services brand acquired.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. One of my secondary, if you will, successes and things I'm most proud of is all the tens of people who came through on the mark over the 35 years. They grew families, they bought houses. We laughed together. We did some really cool, we would do once a year offsites. when we had a good year, we'd be on the Mexican Caribbean with meals cooked for us every day, 20, 25 people down there, work in the morning, play all afternoon, $100,000 just for a week-long business planning event. But it's a way of saying thank you. That is a very important part of my success, and it's one that I'm secondarily most proud of. But I think with regards to people, is there have been some incredible people. Everybody has some genius to them. There have been some incredible people who have come and really changed the trajectory of the business and really contributed. And it's those individuals that really stand out for me. It's one of the lessons learned for all work, and I don't care what country you're in, is everybody's working out their shit and their issues with their boss. It's like mom and dad issues, family issues, whatever they are, they're right in front of you. They're happening right in front of you. I know you got that smile on your face, Troy, so you get it.
I've got the t-shirt and the coffee mug.
Right. And it's one of the things that you have to learn is assess and get a sense of who your people are and what they're wrestling with. And some people don't know how to leave in a good way or close, and they have to leave mad, or they leave upset, or they fabricate things. And it comes back to at the end of the day, you've done everything you can to in a fair way, and no more, not meaning treating them special, but you've been fair with all of your team members. And some people just leave mad for whatever reason. And I can go into more specifics, but an example is not too long ago, a woman worked for me in the late 90s, early 2000s, and lovely woman. And she called me maybe a year ago and apologized for the way she left the company. And what it tells me is the growth that people go through. And sometimes they look back and they've grown in their own way. And she was clearly not on the mark for 20 years probably. And it was really lovely to hear from her. And I was so happy for her that she was in that space, not because basically I got even or I won. It's none of that nonsense. It's really just about, I was happy for them to be more at peace with who they were. But some people are never at peace with who they are, and they're acting out. The other thing is the culture of our business. This one is, I never wanted in transactional analysis terms to have a parent-child relationship in the business with employees. Like, you have to learn how to give feedback. You have to learn how to take it. You can't be splitting people or talking to 10 different people to try to get what you want. You've got to be able to person up, man up, woman up, and show some courage and strength. And it is funny how many people sometimes try to undermine that. And it's one of the lessons is, when people are showing you who they are, you got to do something about it. And one of the lessons is, I should have moved faster on some of those things. But I care deeply. I care deeply about the people who work for us. They work very hard, and so it's important to give them benefits of the doubt. But it's basically the people stuff that is always the challenge. It's both joy in what I've been able to do for the tens. Easily, you're right, Troy, over 100. I think last I counted was about 140, 150 people coming through the business over 35 years. Wow. And I think I've contributed to their lives and how their careers are better. Funny enough, there's a woman who works for us. I was going to say her name, but she's left and coming back, and she's coming back because the grass, isn't always greener on the other side, and they get to really see how fun, not only fun our work is, but how good we are and to work with and the culture. But it's not for everyone, and sticking true to, being an adult and being able to give and receive feedback. All those things are really important.
Yeah, that leads us into the next question. What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Well, I think the first thing is being really clear about what's important. And so that's the first thing, So for example, as a leader, it starts and begins, it starts and ends with you. So if you can't walk the talk, basically shut up, or let someone else lead, or change the culture that you want. But by itself, and we've said this in our work, it's not enough to it's enough to jumpstart the culture, but it's not enough to sustain it. So behaviors, ways of working, has to be embraced by everyone. Here's a perfect example. We have team members in both the US and the UK. And our team members can be live in those two countries, but they could be from anywhere. And we work on projects based on fit and based on capacity, who's got capacity, based on what roles we need to play when. So, but our teams stay consistent with our jobs. So, for example, I could have two Brits working on a project that's in Los Angeles with a senior from New York, right? So everybody has to get on an airplane. Everybody has to be able to travel. And one of the things that's really important is when we're not on projects, it's really easy to basically naturally cordon off by countries. Only the Brits talk to the Brits, only the US citizens, because we're in the same time zone, talk to the US. And one of the things I've been saying from day one, and it has to happen, is, once a week you pick up the phone, you set up an appointment with someone you're not working with, and you spend time talking to them, find out how their life is, find out who they are, find out what they're about, catch up. Doesn't have to have any work involved with it. And that simple behavior of connecting across the pond, across time zones, does a world of good in terms of people being able to laugh together, know what's going on in each other's lives, know that, I went on holiday and know where I went. So you can do that with 40 people, right? You can do that with 30 people. And I think it's critical to be able to do that. But it's not only the words on the page, but it's how do you activate that culture, and how do you demonstrate that day in, day out in words and deeds? It's critical. And then how does everybody embrace that? And then you stay true to that. It's really what it takes. And every time you get new people coming in, you got to start all over. You got to orient them to it. For example, one of the things that we do is, we set up a mentor system or a buddy system with someone that they didn't go through the interview process with, so that they have somebody to reach out to, and someone that they're not working with day in, day out. Another real perfect example is, people tend to think wherever their butts are sitting in a chair, that's the center of the universe. And it's not the center of the universe. It's just where their butt's in a chair in the time zone. But learning about, what time is it right now in Indonesia, or, Singapore? What time is it in London? It's 7 hours ahead, so I can't call. But knowing different time zones and knowing other countries helps really also add to the, not only is our work international, but it just adds to the maturity of the team, and really understanding that none of us are really the center of the universe, right? We're all just kind of actors wherever we're standing or sitting, that's where we're at. But and learning how to kind of activate that in a culture, I think, is also important, and very important.
And tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I did not do very well. I think, Troy, would be perfectly honest with you, because if I had a choice between well, I got to take this job on, and they want me to work over Thanksgiving in the UK in this project. And oh, by the way, in the UK, they don't celebrate Thanksgiving. In fact, just the opposite, right? I might have to make that choice to do that, because it's about eating and paying the bills. But one of the things I did do, and I've done very well, is I integrated my family into. My daughters used to come into the office when we had an office space. We've been entirely virtual since 2017, when I just said, why do we have an office? Like we're in, people are working out of their homes or on project sites. Why do we have an office kind of thing? It's really one of those things of trying to make up for lost time for me now. But I have, like I said, my family traveled with me. We got to do things that most families don't get to do, quite honestly, and incorporated them quite a bit into. But I was not very successful at work-life balance, particularly when your office is in the home, right? And it was onto the home, and it's like, well, I'm just going to step in there and do a few emails. And it's like, poof. I'm better at it now because I'm not in the CEO position and things are lighter, although I still feel a tremendous amount of responsibility for achieving the numbers and the targets and things of that nature. I don't carry that same burden. I think it's important, though, for team members we used to say to them, look, when you're on a project, it can be pretty intense. But when you're off the project, you want to go to the movies in the afternoon, just put it on your calendar out of the office. You don't have to report it. You don't have to do anything like that. You just find the balance in your life. And that worked very well for team members. I think very well, actually.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
Well, I've had an executive coach and a psychologist, therapist that I've worked with since 1990. So I consider that part of my personal professional development. There's a lot of development we gave team members, both on the job as well as one of the things I'm not a big fan of is just taking training classes for the sake of training classes, right? So professional development can be anything from, as I said, it could be a coach, it could be someone needing some psychological support. It could be purchasing a set of videos that we need or going to conferences. One of the things that we do and we've done particularly well is I'm going to mention 4 organizations: the European Organization Design Forum, the U.S. Organization Design Forum, the Socio-Technical Systems Roundtable, and the Organization Design Community are 4 professional industry groups that are global or regional in nature that are core in my industry. We have everybody on our team is expected to basically be involved and contribute to those. And they do conferences and they do trainings, and our team's encouraged to present. What it does is it basically not only gives back our contribution, but it also feeds us. So that's been, there's no negotiation about it. You have to join one of those organizations or more. And part of their work time, they get paid for volunteering. They get paid for attending those events. So it's, those things are really important to us.
Now, you've mentioned you've had coaches. Have you had mentors along the way?
Oh, so many mentors, and really outside of my industry as well as in the industry. Without a doubt, I'm thinking of a handful. And some of my best employees, team members, Simon Davies, I'll just mention their names, Peter Turgoose, this have been both teammates as well as mentors for me. We've taught each other things, and those have been really, really invaluable along the way. So not only have I had mentors outside, but also outside of the industry, but also those within the industry. One of the questions I know that you have is along the lines of mentors. Oh shoot! It's one of the upcoming questions. I'll wait till you ask it.
No, this is the one. Yeah, on mentors. Yep.
So go ahead. I'm the one on mentors. Yeah. What's the one after the mentors, Troy? If you just
board of directors and advisors.
It's the one thing that I wish I would have done, that I wanted to do, always wanted to do, and I've had it in the business plan since 2000, was to develop and get a board, an advisory board, and put them in place. And in lieu of that, I'd have mentors that I would go to, but I never formally put an advisory board in place. And it's not a regret, but it's one of those things that I thought was a lost opportunity. I wish I would have done, and that I feel like I've lost. It could have added so much more to On the Mark and the work we were doing. But
Yeah,
I did. One of the things I know is I did have mentors who were within industry, who were not in our industry, but were in business and were executives, who I still have friendships and relationships with, who were part of the, in many ways, who were advisors as well.
I'm a big proponent of a board of advisors and then eventually board of directors. I sit on 5 boards. A couple of those are advisory boards, but and I chair most of the boards that I sit on. And it's a great experience, not just for me professionally. I really enjoy it, but the business gets a lot out of it. You know, for the last 8 years, been chairing the second largest craft brewery here in Tasmania, Hobart Brewing Company, and there's 3 independent directors on that board. We don't own shares, we don't work in the business. We've got an excellent general manager, and the shareholders are just passive shareholders now. None of them work in the business, and it's just a great thing as the business grows up. You start with a board of advisors and then move to a formal board of directors.
You're absolutely right. And it's great that you're doing that. And it's actually part of my future is looking for that opportunity to be on a board. I've got so much to give back. Um, but that's part of my future, if you will.
I've written a couple of articles on LinkedIn about board of directors and advisors, as well as choosing the right chairperson. I'll shoot those through to you. You might be interested in reading them.
I'd be completely interested in reading those.
Now, Mark, you're one of the few I've had on that's exited a business. I know you're still working in there, but there's been some financial exit. Any advice for those listening that are thinking about exiting one day?
You can't just deliver a service. You gotta have some products behind it. One of the things that really allowed us to be looked at was not only the impact of our work, but the fact that all of our solutions are documented with how-to guides, templates, tools, and which meant that we had not only people and we had that experience, but we also had something to show for it. And I can't emphasize enough how an important part of that equation it is. Like documenting what you do, documenting it in a way that can be taught, that can be replicated. I I also think it's about partnering, letting other businesses see your work where you partner with them to co-deliver for a customer, which is how we got connected with Turner and Townsend. Ironically, we were trying to win a piece of work, which we ended up winning, but a week before the proposal was due, the bids were due, the channel for which it was a very exclusive channel that you had to be a member of that channel to be able to respond to that proposal. The company that was going to give us that channel pulled out. So we were in a bind. We didn't have nowhere to turn. We just happened to have one of our team members had a relationship with one of the executive members at Turner and Townsend, called them up and said, hey, would you be willing to allow us to piggyback? We'll give you a fee, an admin fee, but can we do this? And they said yes. Now, what ended up happening is they saw our work and they saw the impact of our work, and they thought, and 2 months in, 3 months into our work, they're like, holy Toledo, this is different. This is really different. And I think we're the second organization design firm to be acquired. There's only been 2 in the globe. The first one was Cates Kessler, Amy Cates and Greg Kessler, who were headquartered out in New York. They were acquired by Accenture 2 or 3 years ago. And we're the second firm on the mark. And both of us, the way we were acquired was because we were partnering with other consulting firms, and they saw our work and said, we need to have that. So very important to kind of keep that in mind. I think in terms of building your brand and letting others see it, and in terms of your strategy for exit strategy. And of course, we didn't have one exit strategy. We had multiple exit strategies. One of them was actually, Troy, that you mentioned right at the top of the hour, which was selling the business to team. And that was a very real option. And I was investigating that legally. What would an ESOP look like? What would it take, particularly for an international business? We had two businesses. We had On the Mark Inc., paid our taxes out of the US, North America. And we had On the Mark UK Limited, which fed into On the Mark Inc., but ran all our European business through the UK business, paid taxes and all those kinds of things. But so it gets complicated quickly when you're working internationally. It's not simple. So at any rate, it's really about thinking, identifying what are those two or three options. Now the other one was, the third option for me was just work until I'm 70 and then hoard some cash and walk away kind of thing, and see what happens, which was my least favorite option. And I'm glad it worked out the way it did. Totally grateful.
Right, Mark, one of our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Perseverance, getting up the next day, doing it all over again, picking yourself off the ground, taking body blows, and persevering. It's there have been very stressful places for me in this business where I was concerned about my well-being, about my health, and about my psychological states. And so having supports around you and having ways to stay healthy is really, really essential. It's like one of the things I didn't want to do is end up dying from a heart attack, dropping dead or something like that. And of course, you have to recognize that, and you have to think about succession planning, and you got to think about what if, and you got to take care of those around you. And it's just a lot of burden. And it's just getting up in the morning and putting one foot in front of the other again and keeping going and keeping yourself to be able to stay in the game for the next day and the next day after that.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
There's several, but one of the, Peter Senge's The Learning Organization, Jim Collins' Good to Great, the consulting books by Edgar Schein on process consultation, some of the early works in the communications industry by Virginia Satir, who was a communications therapist, and just an incredible woman. And I can actually link things from all those books that I just mentioned into what we do today and how we do it. And it's so funny because sometimes when I'm teaching or talking about referring back to these authors, people go, "Oh, these books are from," some of the books I just mentioned, by the way, Troy, are from the 70s and late 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And I look at things out there today and I just think, I don't know if it's generational and I'm just an old guy trying, basically, or some of these things are just the things that are out there. They're just restating what's already out there. And I like going back to the original points, like who wrote this, who initially wrote about these things, and not just changing the words. And so those things are really important to me. And so there's some of the books that really just change the way I look at the world and how we do our work.
Any great podcasts on the learning tools you use for your own professional development?
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I'm kind of a podcast junkie, and I'll listen to everything from economics to stuff on social sciences to there's one on the mind and behavior economics. The name has skipped me, but I listen to that all the time because I'm always fascinated about behavior and changing behavior. I'll listen to interviews of artists, creatives, just to hear what they have to say and things of that nature. So I don't listen to anyone, but I'll just randomly pick stuff, and I like the variety. I don't want to just stay I don't want to stay just within my field or industry. I like kind of branching out. So I try to stay away from faddish stuff like Joe Rogan, who I think nonsense. showmanship. I really look for things that have substance.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
The ability is read about strategy and how to activate strategy and how to anticipate what's going on in the marketplace. I think your marketplace, however that is, and also listening to customers. So it's not a tool, but it's a way of seeing that I think is really critical for business owners. One of the things we didn't talk about, but I'm going to mention it now since we're right here and it's top of mind for me, is the importance of listening to your customers and learning from what they're saying, and then changing your product or service mix based on trends that you can see coming at you to stay competitive. And learning how to do that is really essential. It's really essential. And some people have it, some people don't.
Yep, totally agree. Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out 35 years ago?
Yeah, follow your heart, follow your passion. You're going to learn, be prepared for that. Denial is a good thing about all the shit that's going to be coming at you. You can't make stuff up. The stuff that I've been through in 35 years, I just can't make it up. And there's been days when I thought, how am I gonna do this? There's been weeks, months where I've been home. Well, a good example, after 2008, I went home. Of course, in 2008, my kids were in either late grade school, early high school. And I said to my ex-wife, I said, my income is this now. I called her and said, cut all the expenses, non-essential expenses back. It's going to be a long, tough road, probably 6 months. Don't know what's going to happen. But one of the things, is that wisdom of learning how to be agile and adjust to issues and make those adjustments. And one of the things I've really learned about problem solving, Troy, is, and I tell this to youngsters all the time, is the further out that you can see a potential problem, the more time and the more options you have to solve that problem. If you wait till the last minute, you only have maybe one option. And so the importance of trying to forecast and look at problems coming at you and seeing them and saying, what am I going to do if this happens? What am I going to do if this happens? And having options for yourself is this essential part of, and I didn't know that when I started, but boy, did I learn that, and I learned that quick.
Thanks so much for your time today, Mark. I really enjoyed our chat. I'm sure we could talk for another hour or two. Congratulations on the growth over the last 35 years, starting in 1990 on your own in the spare bedroom, spending $5,000 on a dot matrix printer and a color screen, and now peaking around 40 full-time equivalent team members. And then in May 2024 being acquired when revenue was around 5 to 7 million top line. So congratulations on a very storied career.
Thank you, Troy, and thanks for all you're doing as well. I really appreciate it.
We're getting some great iTunes reviews. For those listening, please pop over to your podcast app and leave us a review.